Good typography, like good design, is invisible. We don't notice it because the reading experience is smooth and the text is consumed as intended. Ignoring rules and guidelines, on the other hand, can lead to amateur and uncomfortable layouts. In this video, I will show you 7 practical examples and techniques in InDesign that will turn you into a real typesetting maestro. First and foremost, you need entry points on your spreads. These will help readers to be engaged and start reading the content. Now, these can be all kinds of different things, from drop caps to headings to titles to pull quotes. And on this page, for example, I have most of these things that I mentioned, and I can hide them just so you can see without it. It still looks nice, the spread itself, but having these additional details really help to draw you into reading the article. So we have a title, we have a heading, we also have this little arrow here, so you can use graphical elements as well as entry points that directs the view to the text. And then we also have the pull quote here on the right, which usually is extracted from the article and it's just something that's more interesting, but it can also be an additional information. Now let me show you something. If we zoom closer here on the left, notice that I have indents on all the paragraphs, and that's a very good way to separate the block of copy that we have here. So for the body copy of the article, you should normally use either indents or space between paragraphs. But what you should avoid is to have the indent used on the first paragraph. And that's a common mistake with a lot of designers. So I would set this back to 0 here in the paragraph options. First line left indent removed. The whole point of using these first line indents is to create a visual separation, but here we already have a big gap between the heading and the body copy, so there's no need for the indentation. Instead, what we could use is a drop cap, and that's very easy to set up. Once again, just double click on the paragraph and then go into paragraph controls, and here you will find the option drop cap number of lines. Just start increasing that, and that will create that nice entry point. Now, it's good to know that sometimes you might feel like the text is too close to the drop cap. In these cases, you can use the shortcut Alt or Option right arrow to push it a bit further away. That's the same shortcut for kerning and tracking, and it works here as well with the drop cap. Now, if you are interested to learn more creative techniques with drop caps, make sure you subscribe and hit the little bell icon, because I'm already preparing another tutorial on that topic, which will be released soon on the channel. Line length, or measure, as it's also referred to in typography, is another crucial thing you should always pay attention to. Essentially, what it means is that each of your lines should always be between 45 to 90 characters. And that's including spaces as well. Now, the way you can check this is by triple clicking on the text, which will select a single line. And then from the window menu, you can go into the info panel, and there you will see exactly how many characters you have. As you can see, this is 42 characters, and this is already including spaces. So if we want to keep it between 45 to 90, that means we have to widen our columns or text frames. And that is very easy to do. I'm just going to select the whole text frame, and I will type in 65 for the width value. I'm going to use the same value here on the right, and I'm going to just drag them apart a bit, something like that. Now, of course, if you're working with grids, you would have to align this to your grid as well. But now if I select one of these lines, let's just say this one here, I can see now we are within that range that I mentioned earlier. So why is it so important to pay attention to measure? It's mainly to improve the readability of your text. So readability normally means that the convenience of reading. And for example, if I make this text frame much wider, something like this, and I select one of these lines, I can see it's already over 90. So it's a little bit too long, and that makes it uncomfortable to read because you have to jump a very long distance from the end back to the beginning. And likewise, if it's too narrow, then it's just going to be constantly jumping back and forth between the two sides of the column while reading. You can be creative with the alignment of the text, but there's again a couple of rules that you should keep in mind. First of all, align left or flush left is the most common way of setting type, and also justification is very commonly used. Now, the main difference between these two is that with justification, you get completely straight edges on both sides, but you have to be very careful with justification. What can happen is that you end up creating rivers in your text. So let me show you this, especially when you have a narrower text frame. Let's say something like this. If I apply justification on this text by pressing Command or Control Shift J, I can already see a couple of bigger gaps appearing within the text. But it gets even worse if I make my text frame smaller, or especially if I remove hyphenation. So from the paragraph settings, if I remove hyphenation, now it's even more visible that there are some bigger gaps within the text. And sometimes you might not notice them, so a good technique to double check your text is to turn it upside down. So if you just turn it upside down, it's much easier to find them. So what I'm referring to is this section here, or this section here, and so on and so forth. So the way you can avoid these rivers appearing in your text is to only use justification on line length higher than 60 characters, and also make sure that you allow hyphenation, because that will also reduce these unwanted gaps. Since we are talking about alignment, you probably know about the flush right or align right option, but you should only use this again when there is a reason for it. So in this case, I aligned the pull quote to the left, and with that I created a visual negative space here to which I can align the text on the left. So this text is flush right or aligned right, which means that we have a straight edge here. But the problem with it is that because we have the ragged edge on the left, it makes it quite difficult to again jump back and start reading the lines. That's why left aligned or flush left is usually a bit more readable or convenient for your readers. And one last tip about alignment: whenever you're using flush left or flush right, you can also apply the balance ragged lines option, which can also be saved as a paragraph style feature. So this you can find in the additional options up here when you're using the type tool, and there is balance ragged lines. So keep an eye on the selected text frame. This is without the option, and this is with the option enabled. So essentially, the ragged line on the left in this case is getting a little bit more organized when this feature is enabled. So this was before, and this is after. Before we continue, I just wanted to let you know about our creative membership program. For a small monthly fee, you get access to over 200 hours of Adobe certified online training courses. Master all the tools and skills needed to become a professional graphic designer or illustrator. As a pro member, you will get mentoring from me and my team, access to webinars, student forum, and creative briefs to help you build an outstanding portfolio. Pro members can also download the project files for all of our YouTube tutorials. Sign up at yesimadesigner.com/memberships and start your free trial today. And now let's head back to the tutorial. Now, we already seen that first line indent shouldn't be used on the first paragraph of a block of text, but still it is very important to break up these blocks to make it more easy to read. Now, let's take a closer look at this block of text here. Now, at the moment, it's not that great because some of the paragraphs are not even noticeable. Here, for example, we have a paragraph start, which I can only see if I click a couple of times and select the whole paragraph. So there is actually a paragraph starting here. Now, of course, if we are in the normal view and I go into the type menu and show hidden characters, we can also see that there is a paragraph ending here. But this should be visible to our viewer without obviously having all these guidelines and hidden characters. The paragraph break was added there intentionally by the author or writer, and you are responsible as a designer to make this visually apparent. So there's two very simple techniques. One is to use the first line indent, which we already know that we shouldn't use on the first paragraph. But here on the second one, if I go into the paragraph settings, I can find this option and increase it. Let's say 7 millimeters is already noticeable, and we could apply this on these other two paragraphs as well. So just to make sure it's the same, I'm going to type in 7. So that already looks better. The other technique that we could use is to have all of these paragraphs selected and use the space between paragraphs feature, which we can find here. Now let's just choose 4 millimeters for this one. And when I click away, you can see that once again, that creates an even more apparent visual break between the paragraphs. Now you might get carried away and use both of these features together, but that's not a good idea. You should use one or the other. Otherwise, it is an overkill, which hopefully you can already see. So what I'm going to do is on this second paragraph, I'm going to remove completely the left indent. And between these 3 paragraphs, I'm going to remove the space. So once again, it's either space between paragraphs or the first line left indent. Using 2 separate typefaces or fonts within the same block of text can be useful to separate the text and create a visual difference between them. But whenever you do this, what you should pay attention to is to keep the X height the same. So it's good to have contrast, visual contrast between the 2 fonts, which helps the reader to immediately identify that there is a difference. So in this case, we have a serif font on the first paragraph and sans serif on the rest. But the problem is that the X height is not the same. So if you're not familiar with X height, it's essentially the height of the lowercase characters in a typeface. And the closer you can match this value between the 2 fonts that you're pairing, the better. So let's take a closer look at this example here. I have intentionally the same text size used on both of the fonts, and I also have the same first word in these paragraphs. So if I copy this one and place it next to this other one, and I zoom closer, we will see exactly how different the X height is on them. So when pairing fonts, pay attention to having contrast between them, but also to align their X height. Now, you might have heard that it's good to stay away from hyphenation, but that's actually not the case, especially when you are using justification. We already discussed that when you use justified text, hyphenation could help to eliminate reverse. However, when you're using hyphenation, you should also apply optical margin alignment or Roman hanging punctuation, which will keep the hyphens outside the edge of your text frame. So let me show you this. Here we have a few hyphens on the right side. And if I select this text frame, I can get to this option by going to the window menu and under type and tables, choose story. Within that, there's literally one setting, and that is the feature which I was talking about, optical margin alignment. And you can adjust this further if you feel like it's not accurate, but most of the time this is enough. Just simply turn it off and you can already see how much better this looks. So this is without and with optical margin alignment. Now this feature is not only to correct the hyphenations alignment, but also for things like quotation marks. Notice when I put this quotation mark up here, it automatically goes a bit further to the left, so keeps it almost outside of the text frame. I highly recommend to use this feature most of the time on your body copy, and you can actually save it into object styles, not into a paragraph style directly, but into an object style. So if I go to the object styles panel and create a new style, when I go inside here, you will find a separate category called story options. And as long as it's saved there and this object style is applied on your text frame, then it's going to automatically fix these issues. And last but not least, let's talk a bit about using all caps or all capital letters. This can be a great thing to use on titles, headings, but you should avoid using it on longer blocks of text because it makes reading again uncomfortable. And also it can feel a bit like shouting. So even for highlighting a word, let's just say this one here, if I double click on it, I can use Command or Control Shift K to quickly switch to all caps. That feels a bit of an overkill. Instead of setting it to all caps, we can just highlight it by changing the formatting a bit, maybe to medium. By the way, whenever you have multiple weights for a typeface, you should always increase the weight in 2 levels for the highlighted text. Because if I go back, let's say, to regular, then the difference is not as obvious as when I went all the way up to medium. That's just a side note, but going back to all capitals, you can see that it works really well on this text here on the right because it's only a few words and it really emphasizes that pull quote. But here on the left side in the body copy, I'm using the normal sentence case formatting. And it is a proven fact that it's easier to read when you have normal sentence case because you can see exactly where a sentence starts. And also with lowercase characters, you get the ascending and descending stems, which is almost like a visual shortcut for faster reading or scanning the text while you're reading. So once again, feel free to use all caps on titles and headings, but avoid it on longer blocks of text. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we release new videos. Click on the link on my right and start your membership today to get access to over 200 hours of training courses and personal mentoring by me and my team of creative professionals. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.